This is tonight to talk about the Waterfront Land Use Plan, and thank you very much for showing up. We know you're all very busy people. You're the kind of people who have a lot going on in your life, and we're thankful that you're here to do this. So we're going to try to be very efficient with your time. And I have a very easy role. All I'm doing is introducing and taking some notes. It's you that are going to have to work tonight, and you're going to give us your ideas. So we appreciate that. But we're going to have some fun doing it, too. And tonight, it's kind of a freebie. Free in that we're not going to hinder you with a lot of port policies as we go forward. It's a chance to think freely about your vision of the waterfront. So think about that. So we invite you to participate, give us your ideas. Thank you. And on we go. And we're going to move right along. We have a packed agenda. We're going to try to stay with it, and that's going to be part of my role. Now I get to introduce our Executive Director, Monique Moyer.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Show of hands for any of you, is this your first time here at the James R. Herman Cruise Terminal? Fantastic. Well, welcome. This is, first of all, Monique Moyer. I'm the port director. But this building is the perfect place for our event tonight. It is one of the examples of what the port is today, what the port was yesterday, and how that has come together. What I love about this building is it really epitomizes what is unique about our port, and that is that it's where maritime meets the neighborhood, meets tourism, meets environmental stewardism, meets recreation, meets public access, and meets an incredible amount of open space. And I can promise you that there just aren't ports and waterfronts that are doing that around the world. In fact, most cruise ship terminals are characterized by tarmac and fencing, and they're in industrialized areas where, as the public, you bus in and you bus out. But yet, look at ours. If you look behind you, you get a sense of the quaintness of our city, as it must have been when our forefounders arrived by water. And as you look out, you get a sense of the immenseness of our bay, but also the great architecture that characterizes San Francisco. And so I couldn't think of a more inspiring point to envision what the port is and what the port will continue to be. Do you know it's been 25 years since the voices were raised to call for port planning about its future? 25 years, a quarter of a century. It took 7 years to come up with the roadmap, and one of the key attributes of that roadmap was the concept of reuniting the port with the city and reuniting the city with its waterfront. Well, today, if you can believe it, 24 million people come to the port each year. 24 million people is 2.5 times the number of passengers that go through the Oakland airport. But as you look out, there are no turnstiles, there's no fencing, there's no TSA guards. It's 24 million people who get to be here while we operate a maritime business, while we operate a tourism business, while we make the front door for so many people who live in our city and our region. It's really very inspiring, and it's because of the incredible work and foresight that went into that planning process so many years ago. And that Waterfront Land Use Plan, which was the end result of that planning process, has really guided everything that we've done. It hasn't hit the mark perfectly. It didn't call out that there would be a cruise ship terminal here at Pier 27, for example. It didn't say that the Exploratorium would be at Pier 15, but it created the benchmarks that allowed for us to have that type of opportunity and pull it all together. But nonetheless, there's a lot of work to do. There are 39 historic piers at the Port of San Francisco. We've only rescued 11 of them. So we have to think about that. What is going to happen to the rest of those piers? Are they going to remain derelict? What's going to happen as the environment puts pressure on them? Climate change comes along. What happens as the humans put pressure on them and our region continues to expand? Our port is still serving all of the uses for which it was built. We're still in the fishing business. We're still in the passenger business. We're still in the transportation business. But yet we've evolved, as our city has, into a lot of other great uses too. And we've done it in a way that can last for more generations, not just the generations that have come before. So, thank you all for being part of that. Thank you for joining tonight. If you are a member of the working group or the advisory teams, please stand for just a minute and be recognized. Thank you all so very, very much. As you probably know, we received an amazing 128 applications to help participate in this process. That's how important it is to people. And we received applications from people who have been participating with the port for decades and decades, and applications from people who know nothing about the maritime business or know nothing about the port. And through a lot of careful work, we've been able to put together all of you who represent diverse areas of interest, diverse backgrounds, both personally and professionally, and diverse parts of our city. So I'm really just thank you. I'm very humbled by you coming together, and thank you for all that you are going to be doing to help us out into the future. And it's really very, very important to all of us to hear your voices, but to remember this port is 152 years old. Anything that we do together needs to continue that legacy of serving generations. And we've done an amazing job. And so I hope you will feel inspired to continue along the journey with us. And I thank you so much for joining. And now I would like to have my favorite port commissioner, happens to be the only one here tonight, say a few special words as well. Please welcome the Vice President of the Port Commission, Mr. Willie Adams.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm really glad to see everyone out here today. And I would just like to say that, first of all, I want you to know that I appreciate your commitment. And just real quickly, I'll just tell you a little bit about me real quickly. I'm a 36-year member of the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union. I'm the International Secretary-Treasurer. And I put in 70 hours a week as a union leader, traveling all over the world, serving my union. But the highest honor I get is being a port commissioner for the port here of San Francisco. And if it means 15, 20, 30 hours a week, I'm committed to do that. Whether I was in Cape Town, Antarctica, wherever, when Director Moyer called me, I answered the call because I have a commitment. And when Mayor Lee appointed me to this commission, I was all in. And I know that you are going to be all in because this is a commitment. And when we were going through the process, one of the things that I said was that I'm going to look at the attendance records of everyone that's participating. The mayor holds all the commissioners to that standard. I have seen Mayor Lee take people off the commission, different commissions, for not participating. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And I think that that's important. And we need your help because you're going to bring the balance that we need to take this port to the next level. This is the most expensive real estate in a port in the United States. This is a treasure, like in a museum. And we have to take care of it with kid gloves. But there's a renaissance happening in this port. And the decisions that we make, generations will have to live with that. We have approximately 15,000 people a year moving to our city. San Francisco, we're a beacon of light. People are looking to us. And so now, working with you, we're going to empower to take the port and take it in a different direction, which I think is positive. Since I've been on the commission, we've started having port commission meetings out in the community. It was time to get out of the ivory towers and get down on the ground where the people are at. This port belongs to the people. You know what's amazing? There's a lot of people in San Francisco that don't even know it's a port here. And we have to educate them. This is their port. It doesn't matter what your background is, ethnicity, or economics. This port belongs to everybody. And in saying that, I want to thank Diane, Brad, and Byron, because as the commission, we have empowered them to work with you. I will be coming out, so will the rest of the commissioners participating, because we do not want this project to fail. We want it to succeed as we move forward. And just know that if you need any support from the commissioners, we are here. But what it's going to take is out-of-the-box thinking. And they always say that the future belongs to the bold. And we have to grasp it and take it in a new direction with some passion, with some fire. But also, it's good to have good debates. I think it's good. I am glad that we have a lot of different points of view. Debates are healthy. You can always learn. There's always more than one way to do something. Sometimes two people can be right. Sometimes some person does it slow. Sometimes person does it fast. But at the end of the day, they get where they need to get. So once again, I want to thank you on behalf of all the commissioners, the port staff, but realistically, please thank you for your passion and your commission. And I truly meant what I said, that we will be looking to see who participates. We will be here because leadership begins not from the back, it's being up front and not being political, but doing what's right. And we owe an obligation to every citizen in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I know that it will be joined in future meetings by our other commissioners as well. This is a very, very important task, as Commissioner Adams so artfully said. I was going to introduce our co-chairs, but I'm not seeing either one of them. So with that, I think I will pass this back to you, Diane. So again, thank you all very much, and we look forward to your inspiring ideas.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Diane Oshima with the Ports Planning and Development Division. Thank you so much for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones as well. Before we break out, we wanted to dedicate most of this time, obviously, for you to be able to share some discussions so that we can hear from the public what's in your hearts and minds around the waterfront. We wanted to provide a quick, high-level overview of where we are today and where we want this public process to take shape and move forward. For those of you who are not aware, the Port of San Francisco does not control all of the waterfront areas that you might think of. We have 7.5 miles from Fisherman's Wharf, just east of Aquatic Park, through the ferry building and the AT&T ballpark, all the way down to India Basin, down in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood, but just short of the Hunters Point former power plant site. So we're lucky in that the city has publicly owned shoreline around 3 of its 4 sides. The port's portion is that which is shown here today. Quickly, without getting into a lot of details, this image is to try and communicate that there are many different voices when it comes to talking about the waterfront. The voices from the public, from the citizenry, is probably the most important because we have a plethora of public agencies that have overlapping regulatory and public policy jurisdiction over the port. So while we may be crafting a waterfront land use plan here, all of the projects going forward actually need to go through a meshing of different interests, both from the statewide level that's administered by the California State Lands Commission, BCDC, many of you who are aware of this, San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. We have the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And then for any in-water construction, there's also a whole list of other agencies that will get involved in weighing in on what's appropriate for the waterfront. So the ideas that come through in these early sessions and that get vetted through projects have to go through a very multiple layered process, and we will be going over that in much more detail as the public process for the Waterfront Plan update carries on. Quickly, just about the Waterfront Land Use Plan, in case you're not familiar, it was originally approved in 1997 following a lengthy public planning process led by another Waterfront Plan Advisory Board, similar to our structure that we've set up here. It's been amended a few times, but it covers not only land use, even it's a Waterfront Land Use Plan because that was the directed title that the port was told that it had to be named for, but it also covers urban design, architectural, historic preservation, public open space policies, and a network of those public benefits along the full 7.5 miles. In 2015, actually we started a year ago in 2014, but we finalized our report in 2015 after getting comments from the public that did a comprehensive review of what all has happened along the port waterfront since the Waterfront Plan was approved in '97. And we're using that as a springboard for this public process moving forward. I'm sorry for the little the thing at the bottom, but basically, I already said it, so we're good. On the back of your agenda, is the timetable for the public process. So we won't go through the steps today, but the working group, the Waterfront Plan working group that has been convened, will hold public hearings and will be going over the topics that are shown on this timeline against the wall and on the back of your agenda. So any of you who are not already on our email list and would like to receive noticing about when those meetings take place, we're happy to take your name and number tonight. In terms of the Waterfront Plan goals itself, as Monique mentioned, the vision at the time in 1997, when the city was just starting to build the Embarcadero transportation improvements and the Embarcadero Freeway was still up or in the process of being taken down, was to reunite the city with the waterfront. And that is the frame in which all of these goal statements about making sure that we have a home always for the 10 different maritime industries here at the Port of San Francisco, that we have a revitalized waterfront. How do we make improvements to it but maintain its character and provide for a diversity of activities and operations that are interspersed and connected by a network of public parks and open space, and that really respect the history of the city and the waterfront and make sure that we incorporate those into the new improvements. And it's not directly reflected here, but look at it from a business and a financially feasible standpoint as well. So those are the values in the Waterfront Plan now. They're the values that are reflected in the vision questionnaire that you have as your handout tonight. We're trying to get your input on what your experience of the waterfront has been all these many years and see how they relate with those goals that are in the plan. Do you understand them? Do you agree with them? Do you see that there are some updates that we should be considering? We'd like to be able to hear your input on that against these goal statements so we can start understanding what might need to be updated. As Port staff, we think that they've been a pretty good foundation that have guided the Port's improvements to date, but you may have different ideas. And if you have outside-the-box ideas like what Commissioner Adams was referring to, we also want to hear about that as well. For example, some of those outside ideas, we didn't have sea level rise and the threat of flooding along the Embarcadero at the time that the Waterfront Land Use Plan was being developed. We got a lot of comments from people concerned about how not just the port, but the city and the region at large are going to be trying to tackle that, and what does that mean for the assets at the port on the ground today. Our seawall is just like our finger piers. Are over 100. It's over 100 years old. It was built in a series of segments over 40 years, and it was built before there were seismic codes and earthquake safety standards. And so there's concern about what's the integrity of our seawall from the standpoint of looking at major earthquake risk as we look forward in the next 30 years. So a lot of the issues that we have flagged for the public to discuss in this Waterfront Plan update have a lot to do with the waterfront public infrastructure and what it protects for the rest of the city as well. Our sewer systems, BART, Muni tunnels, there's many other facilities and infrastructure that are off of port property that rely on the seawall. In terms of public parks and open space, we're very proud over the improvements that we've been able to make along the waterfront these last few years, but we did also get a number of comments from people about how we can maybe even use these waterfront parks and open spaces more for a wider variety of activities, and so we're interested in getting your insights on that. Transportation. Many comments about the concerns about transportation accessibility to the waterfront and along the waterfront, and how that mobility intersects with improvements of public space and the public realm so that we can promote non-auto travel as much as possible. We're working very heavily with SFMTA. I see Peter Albert is here from the SFMTA and the city family on that, because many of those services are not in the direct control of the port. But where we can on ferries and water taxis and water transport, the Port Commission is taking ownership of that. We also recognize that there have been a lot of advances on environmental and ecological protection and sustainability that really weren't in place at the time that the Waterfront Plan was first adopted. We recognize that there are opportunities with the new technological improvements to improve that, and so we anticipate that we will hear more from you on that. So today, the objectives for our workshops are for you to think about those goals, the needs that we've identified at a staff level so far, and to layer that against your own experiences and observations about the Port Waterfront, what has worked, what hasn't, what's missing, and the tabletop sessions that we'll be setting up are your place to be able to really engage each other about that and report back to us. Fortunately, there have been a lot of changes along the waterfront, so I'm just going to sort of scroll through a sampling of that. Monique talked about here the James R. Herman Cruise Terminal. This is a summary that's in our comprehensive review of the Waterfront Plan as to what's happened over the last 17 years. It's pretty dramatic, and we do believe that the reuniting the city with the waterfront has largely taken place through these improvements. So here's the Exploratorium site before they came in, and now if you compare it with the activity in the family and the diversity of people who are coming to enjoy that science interactive museum. This is the Pier 43 Promenade up in the Fisherman's Wharf area, where we had a dilapidated parking lot on a pier that we removed in order to be able to give a good place to be able to enjoy the views of Alcatraz. This is the port's offices. It was a garage after it was a sugar warehouse. Now many of you come to our public meetings at Pier 1. All of these finger pier rehabilitation projects have been done according to the Secretary of Interior standards, and that historic preservation benefit was something that state lands recognized as something that enabled us to do the office uses that were needed to pay for those improvements. Similarly, Pier 1.535, Lamar Restaurant, Plant Cafe, all of those improvements, that mix of uses with the public access that rings the edge of the piers is all part of the formula that was advanced through the Waterfront Plan. And not to forget that we do have natural areas too, smaller in scope perhaps than the urban waterfront that we're more familiar with, but this is down at Heron's Head Park, where we've got a beautiful natural habitat wetland that has also become a center for environmental education for our kids. And the Eco Center on that side of the screen there is a completely off-the-grid facility for education. So with that bit of inspiration, with your thinking, what we're asking you to do is to tell us what kind of port you want. The table exercises here are set up so that there will be facilitators at each of your tables. I think that you all should have gotten table number assignments to them. We weren't sure exactly how many people were going to come here. We were thinking that around 8 people or so would be great to have around each table or more. So if you've got a smaller group around your table, we'll probably regroup you into more of a critical mass. And the facilitator will look for somebody who's willing to kind of speak for the group so that after the breakout sessions for the tabletops, you'll come back to this area, and then Dan Hodap, who is introducing us all, will take the wall notes as each group does a 2 to 3 minute reporting out of the big ideas and issues that you talked about at each of your tabletops. We wanted to create this opportunity to just sort of do a fresh air exchange about your thoughts about the waterfront before we start with the actual meeting process for the Waterfront Plan update. As the schedule and timeline shows on that back of the agenda, there's going to be a lot of content that falls into place, a lot of information about what the port framework is that it has to operate within. But we didn't really want to throw that on you from the very outset. We wanted to give you a chance to speak from your heart. And so that's what this workshop is about. We will be memorializing the input that we get in some form. All of the information that we have will be on the port's website so that you can always review it, and we expect that the values that you express in these workshops and the public comments that we get through the end of the month, because we have invited the public to be able to weigh in online in case they weren't able to make it tonight, we will bring that together for the working group so that at periodic points in the public process, you'll be able to sort of take a pause, think about what's been discussed, but compare it up against some of these values that we're hearing this month. So with that, thank you very much again for coming. We will take the next half an hour or so once you settle into the tabletops for each of the facilitators to help you through those discussions using the questions that are in that vision questionnaire that you should also have a copy of. So we'll see you back in a little bit. Thanks so much.
Yeah, actually, I went down to that. That was the first time I've noticed the big ones down there.
Currently, the board of directors of Treasure Island, and happy to see
Oh, yeah, because I had tried to get down third.
I'll be talking about. As Diane said, that was one thing that wasn't on people's minds in 1997. So that's really an emerging.
It's a new building, we'll be expanding that collection of artists. What we're going to do is create a stronger connection. Which makes sense.
Maritime working job. West Star.
People have only started walking if you wanted to do something.
I thought it was really good. It's a small thing.
That's where we're seeing opportunities to leverage, and of course that brings in sometimes development or redevelopment, and that's where we get these debates on, okay, what is that bringing?
Yeah, I mean, with the open space that you had there, like with the Marina Green, they come down and they play soccer. Volleyball, their kites are out there constantly. They have the marathons out there.
A place where they can fly kites, so they can throw the baseball.
One goal was access along the waterfront, and so open spaces that provide access.
So there should be a diversity of commercial opportunity.
When you come down here to this wonderful building, and in particular the plaza, the public space, put the circle around all of the things that the board.
What I've done is I sort of starred every major sort of landmark.
No, I was speaking rhetorically, but I think maritime related, commercial uses.
But there's been some buildings that done around there that nobody objected to. You know, if you build too high and you build families into the neighborhood as opposed to...
What was it that
we have the most money we've ever had in the history of the city sloshing around here? I don't see like a give to the seawall fund.
And as the city getting some open space and some access, some greenway access.
Whereas here, especially on the southern waterfront, which obviously it's an old working waterfront, so that wasn't an option then.
I know we don't want a string of all those buildings that they built in downtown. We don't want the Embarcadero to look like that, like Miami.
Urban design was appropriate preservation of historic resources.
Port has brought in terms of increased traffic and congestion.
Then we also thought it was important to
So we had 9 groups. It looked like a lot of great conversation going on. And what we'd like to do now is have each group take about 3 minutes maximum and give us not the whole summary of what you did, but if you want others to hear your 3 or 4 or so main points, we want to go through and hear what those are, and we're going to try to record them. We also get to keep all your maps, all your notes, and we have a box here for any handouts. Where did our box go, Diane? We have a box to collect your handouts and your written comments so that We get to keep them. We get to record them. We get to document it as part of what you said tonight. Everybody's good on that? I can tell. Okay, we have group numbers here. And of course, we're going to start with number 1. Where is number 1 back there? And who is going to give us the report out on number 1? Mr. Bennett. You can be wherever you want. You can point to your map, you can stand up, but you have to speak loudly and you have to speak into this microphone.
Okay, we had an awesome group, so I don't know if I can get it down into 3 points. But I'm going to I'll do it by category. Number 1, as far as a working port, there was a general feeling there should be more recreational boating berthing facilities along the waterfront. And a separate point would be more access for human-powered vessels. So that's point 1, I guess. I get 3 points. Let's see. Diversity of activities. Diversity of activities. One item we spent quite a bit of time talking about was expanding opportunities for families with kids, with more free and inexpensive activities. Another suggestion along diversity of activities was event venues, indoors, outdoors, for music, plays, festivals, but just a more active rather than a just passive open space. Under parks, open space, and transportation, there was a desire, particularly in the southern waterfront, for more open space, especially large open spaces. There was a discussion about active recreation, which fell both in the category of parks and open space, but probably under diversified activities. And let's see, there's a new goal that was brought up. I think we're almost done with the Waterfront Plan here. The new goal was adaptive resiliency. And we're going to probably spend many months on what that means. So let's see. And the final point, I guess, under urban design was appropriate preservation of historic resources. Appropriate preservation of historic resources. So I don't know if we kept it to 3 points, but we kept it to 3 minutes.
Kirk, thank you very much. And I got to finish up that word, and I'll do that in just a second. Group number 2. Let's hear it for group number 1, first of all. Thank you. Okay, number 2. Who's our spokesperson? Yes, and your name. Yes, please. Yes, you have to for the recording.
Hi, my name's Joe Jason. I'm a resident at India Basin, and I'm representing group number 2. So I need to put down my quick note here. All right, so we have 3 minutes, and our group broke it down into we are here for economic and land development discussions, and we're going to cover macro and micro in our agenda here. So in respect to macro, philosophically, we'd like the port to think about land and water equally, since we're in the Bay area, and the Bay is our community to the rest of our community. So when you're thinking about our city, please think about the land and water equally. And when you give that mind share and you're thinking strategically, please think of, I'm repeating myself, the Bay and the water. We'd also like to have you think in a macro theme of continuity and balance. When you're thinking about the whole 7.5 shoreline, of the continuity with parks and open space. Number 2, residential. Number 3, commercial. And lastly, number 4, industrial/cargo. So continuity and balance associated when you're thinking about our 7.5 miles. And we'd like the port to have a formal advertised community outreach campaign with those 4 communities. So we have a relationship with the port. So the port is advertising, like a community outreach with those communities. The other portion is we think about manufacturing in two categories: physical goods and digital goods with the city and the port. So with physical goods, we have a new small and medium-sized enterprise group called SF Made. So if the port could have a relationship with SF Made, a formal relationship for physical goods. And then there's a concept that we know of in Hong Kong called Cyberport. And Cyberport has a relationship with Hong Kong and their relationship with special digital goods. So on the campus of Hong Kong Cyberport, you would have special licenses at a discounted rate. Let's say Salesforce.com would give port companies a discounted rate on their licenses. Also tax incentives. We know that the mayor is great at giving out tax incentives to large corporations. Let's have the port, lobby for tax incentives for small corporations. So physical goods and digital goods. And then our micro themes are sea level rise, a better integration with Blue Green Way and Bay Trail. And if we could get those even closer to the water, we'd like that. And then I think that's it. Oh, broader audience demographics with the Blue Green Way Trail. So we thought that maybe more demographics could use it. Maybe skateboarders could use it, or not just people that own electric bicycles and that have a certain income level. So I guess a diversified demographic, we would like to have that. And I think that's it for winding down. I just want to say on a personal note that it is a unique time for us in San Francisco that Silicon Valley is migrating to San Francisco, and it's very significant. And Samsung and Sony and Google and everyone's opening up offices out here. So we need to be taking, carpe diem moment on this epicenter that we're here at. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. Group number 3, who's our spokesperson? And your name? Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm an architect here in San Francisco. I'm also on the Waterfront Urban Design Advisory Committee. So we're at Group 3, and we really tried to keep the conversation kind of at like a higher level, and because it's easy. It's very easy to get down into like specifics, as we all know, and there's a lot to talk about. But so we started by talking about what has been successful over the past 25 years and the previous Waterfront Plan, and we all agreed in our group that some of the big moments, like AT&T Park, the ferry building, and the Exploratorium, have been hugely successful and have contributed greatly to our city. And then we all pointed out, we kind of agreed that we have these great moments and these great kind of anchor point destinations along the waterfront, but it'd be nice to see some smaller interventions in between these bigger points, so that you don't have so many dead zones in between these different destinations, but perhaps you have restaurants. And it was also brought up that maybe we pointed out Red's Java House as an example of a great smaller moment along the waterfront that people love and cherish, and perhaps it'd be nice to see some more of that. Also, it was mentioned to see some public amenities along the waterfront. Not just in the ferry building, for instance, but maybe some restrooms and maybe some more shade and seating areas. There were also some concerns, some higher level concerns about the impact that the changes on the port have brought in terms of increased traffic and congestion. So I think going forward, one of the big things to be addressed is how do we mitigate traffic? And one thing that was suggested was to focus more on transportation, public transportation, and less on the individual private automobile to access areas along the waterfront. And one thing that was discussed was also perhaps having even a separate dedicated bike lane. But all this stuff we're talking about underlying all this is the threat of sea level rise and seawall repair, which is we agreed in our group was probably the most important thing to address. It's definitely not the most glamorous thing to talk about, but without addressing it, nothing else can be done. So I guess that's the third point.
Thank you very much. That was great. Hope my markers last. Number 4, who's our spokesperson? Hey.
Hi. Hello, my name is Dimitri. I work for the Port of San Francisco. I had the distinct pleasure of talking to Table 4 about some of the stuff that we have been asking here. Specifically, we started off our conversation by talking about what we thought the Port had done well with the goals. We thought that the Port had done a pretty good job reinvigorating the waterfront. We just hadn't done the best job of inviting folks down to the waterfront to actually be able to enjoy the waterfront that we've built for those folks. So we talked a lot about different things along the waterfront. Specifically, there were some art installations that we were interested in. We talked about down at Pier 70, there's some artist workshops, and specifically the difference between arts and entertainment. Arts are more for people to enjoy, for artists to produce their work, whereas entertainment is more of a specific exhibition for folks to come and enjoy. And so we identified some points. Pier 70 has some good artist workshops down there, as well as up at Pier 14. There's an artist installation that's open to the public. Currently, right now, there's a sculpture in place. And then we talked about other places in the future where we might be able to identify areas we'd like to see that kind of thing expanded along the waterfront. And then that opened up a discussion into more of what folks are doing along the waterfront, what they're enjoying, and that eventually led into what they're not enjoying. And one of the big pain points we had was transportation. Specifically, we spent a lot of time discussing in depth both transportation and transportation projects that had happened along the waterfront. We were very interested along the northern waterfront in seeing a development of some form of transportation plan, anything from the expansion of that central subway you've heard about, or increasing the historic streetcars along the Embarcadero. In the southern waterfront, we definitely talked about increasing or improving the service of the T-line or a number of other services in the area, as well as we actually talked very high level. There's a possibility of adding an additional BART tunnel down that way, so we were very interested in supporting something like that for the neighborhood. There's a lot of people coming in that way, so it would be good to have a growth in transportation. Additionally, we talked about the water taxis, and I encouraged people to get out there and give that a shot. They do function. There is a locals discount if you get a chance to try that. Something that the Port has done on our side to be able to work for the transportation. And then additionally, one of the other things that we hit home about was the just diversity of everything happening at the Port. There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of different people interacting, and we're really happy about sort of how that's come together. We just want to be able to share that with more people. Thank you.
You have to wait for me to catch up. That was number 4, right? Number 5. Who do we have? Our spokesperson.
I'm Pia Hinkle, and I'm a member of the Open Space Recreation Advisory Team. So we talked a lot. We kind of worked our way down the waterfront. But the things that we thought were most important was talking about, again, tying. So much focus has been on the land side, improving access to the water, next to the water, and even into the water along the whole waterfront. Everything from increasing the profile of water taxis. A lot of people don't even know they exist. It's hard to find the signs. It's not sort of tied into the city transportation system in any kind of real way. So coordinating with Muni on that, making it seem really part of, if you come visit here, here's a way to get around. Promoting existing access to waterfront areas. There's a lot of public space around buildings that people don't seem to know about. We've got big crowds along the promenade, but not much around these little hidden areas. So maybe increasing signage and sort of education around those areas. And then water-oriented recreation, whether that's preserving small boat dry dock, finding more little places for people to launch small boats on the Commerce side of the southern waterfront, having more small boat parking in places where people can tie up for a couple hours. Then another piece we talked about was, with development along the waterfront, reviewing height limits and really trying to eliminate spot zoning where it's a project by project, sort of saying, let's decide and then follow the guidelines and make sure we preserve view corridors, not just for buildings and people, but even for pedestrians along the waterfront walking. Then we also felt it was important to look at ways to preserve the traditional maritime industry. So to keep the port in the port and raising the profile of fishing even outside of Pier 45 and Fisherman's Wharf, whether there's any opportunities along other parts of the waterfront to have any kind of fishing-related activity or education. And preserving gritty parts of waterfront industry, whether that's the bulk cargo area and the shipping that's left in the port, and maybe trying to find companion industries to help subsidize those industries that are not necessarily thriving. And then the last thing was, we all agreed that, again, the seawall was very important to try to promote and educate the public and companies and industries about how crucial it is to development and the maintenance of the whole city and the port properties, and to tie it in to climate change and the city's readiness for any kind of major environmental disaster. That was basically it.
Thank you very much. That was number 5. Number 6, our spokesperson. I see Alec Bash moving towards the front. Nope.
Hi. So we didn't have a map. Sorry about that. I think we had a good discussion, Group 6. We had certainly a lot of folks at the table with a lot of experience. Some of the smaller items we hit on have been mentioned by other groups as well, so I'll stick to kind of some of the main points. I think right off the bat, the group certainly acknowledged first and foremost that the issues of sea level rise, seismic safety, and the safety of the seawall were a very important part of this forthcoming process. That was the first thing that we talked about. The third bullet point about environmental protection and sustainability, there were a couple add-ons our group had to that. One was an encouragement for the port into seeing what it can do to be a leader in recycled water use going forward, and also acknowledgement of the port's role as an environmental steward. Other areas of our discussion centered on transportation. There were certainly several comments from the group about encouragement for comprehensive transportation planning going forward, both on the land side and the water side. Certainly encouragement for the port to understand early on the concepts and the discussion surrounding the second BART tube. Accessibility to the waterfront was also an important point for us, both from the water side, considering what we can do to improve waterside access for human-powered vehicles, sailboats, as well as what was mentioned earlier, activating or helping the public understand better the already active spaces along the waterfront and the use for that. A couple other things that were of importance to the group were historic preservation, encouraging historic preservation, and doing what we can, particularly around Pier 70 as a model for those type of historic buildings that the public seems to have interest in. Portland was mentioned as a other waterfront by two different members of our group that provided a good example for being inviting and accessible and creating additional active uses. And some questions from the group came up about getting further information on the plans for the waterfront from Pier 70 South, as well as the western side of the Embarcadero, understanding planning for that and its compatibility to the waterfront areas of the port.
Great. Thank you very much. Looking for group number 7.
So good evening, everyone. Linda Fedike of Richardson. I'm also a long time India Basin resident and current director, board of director, Treasure Island Development, and former San Francisco Planning Commissioner and BCDC. Our discussions were informed by Director Monique Morris. She mentioned in her presentation that the port currently is very symbolic of sound, sustainable development, open space, access, greenery, a great waterfront, one of the most beautiful in the world. And we were also, informed by Commissioner Adams. He literally told us to think outside the box. And so we are thinking outside the box. We believe that the sea level rise, the seismic of safety, and the environmental protection are things that we must accentuate in our development. How do we get there? We know currently that the port is what is known as an enterprise agency, which really means, for people that may or may not know about that the port has to generate its own revenue. There is no way in the world that you're going to accomplish the seawall and all the goodies and all the things to make San Francisco Port viable for the next 100 years. And so we believe that there must be a comprehensive financial analysis must be done as part of this working group exercise. What do we mean by that? We know that it's going to take billions of dollars to accomplish what we're faced with flooding, sea rise levels. The citizens of San Francisco, elected officials, everyone must know that the internal generation and basically what the port is not going to do that. We need to be upfront with that there so that they can know from the financial analysis that it might take 25 billion over 25, 30 years in order to do that. Let's put everything right now, and let's also prioritize what we have based on the needs and also the danger that we face. Should there be flooding? Should there be sea water rise and all this other stuff? So we want that to be part of this exercise. And number two, we also want to make it sustainable. And again, this sustainability also tie in with, again, the financial requirements that what we're going to have. And we really, really need to conduct a comprehensive exercise to really define sustainability, what kind of projects we're talking about, and how do we get there. It's a good thing if the port, again, as it exists, continue to be sustainable. But looking at the future then, the developments and everything must be guided by how we coin sustainability, and we need to be serious about those kind of discussions, so we really wanted to put that in there. Number three, we feel there are so many, many possibilities into making San Francisco, our port, not only viable, but to be one of the best in the world. We need to look at best practices all over the world. That should be in there. And maritime. People talk about, we want to make San Francisco a maritime or whatever. We believe we need to define what we are now calling, maritime. Again, the Port of Oakland is a full-fledged, maritime, with capabilities. Art is lesser, but again, let's bring to the table what exactly we mean by the word maritime. Public-private partnerships. We wanted to make sure there's no way that the port could be developed. We encourage there needs to be a public-private partnerships. By putting that on the table, then we can begin the analysis of, again, what kinds of public-private partnership do we need? But that needs to be upfront, because the city by itself, no city in America, in the world, can embark on large-scale projects without a public-private partnerships. There is nothing wrong with bringing a private capitals into development. It's not a bad thing, but we need to look at as an overall concept. Look at the bigger picture in terms of the development of the port. We were also informed by Chicago that Chicago, I'm going to use the word porous. And that basically means we want more port access. And we need to look at best practices, what Chicago is doing well, and see if we can incorporate some of those elements into the port of, San Francisco. And so, in a nutshell, this is basically what we talk about, that our transportation, again, must be, water transportation should be more encouraged. And what do we mean by an encouragement? The current ferry system are great, but we're going to need more comprehensive avenues and infrastructure in order to really do that. That's what we came about.
Thank you very much. That's great. I love the way we're getting diverse points of views. Not everybody approaches the problem the same way, and that's great. We'd like more opinions. Group number 8, who is going to tell us? Mr. Beaupre.
We were group 8 and 9. Most all of the points have already been raised, so I'll be brief. But on a high level, we went through each of the goals and values that were up here, or tried to get through them all, and wanted to determine whether they're still relevant. And for the most part, we felt they were. The one that we thought needed the most work was a revitalized waterfront, seeing that the group felt that it was mostly revitalized. They thought maybe replacing revitalized with invest and prioritize investment in the waterfront while also maintaining the integrity of the port. The other thing that was brought up was the idea of inserting into each of the goals environmental sustainability. And then the issue of elevating the infrastructure needs of the port at a public level seemed critical, particularly as it relates to sea level rise, seismic issues, and the repair of the seawall. I think that captures Group 8 and Group 9. Group 10?
Okay, I'll be brief too. I'm Peter Albert. I work at MTA. Our table went through a bunch of different points. I'm just going to read you the 4 ones that we identified as the big ones, and then I'll also talk about a dream statement we had. First of all, we gravitated toward transportation. That wasn't me. That was the table doing that. It's just, I guess I attract that kind of element. But what was interesting was a focus on how tourists can get from this really impacted part of the waterfront to Union Square. And that was one particular theme that got echoed on a bit. So elements like expanding frequency of the F line or the central subway extension, those came into that, or the water transportation. Another component was a long conversation about the public trust and the lack of understanding about the restrictions. So for us to articulate a vision, we felt it was pretty important to have a better understanding what the rules really were about public trust. It's part of the thinking outside the box conversation, but it also understands that we've already established a tradition of working in the public trust. So that's one big element there. The parking lots on the land side, especially in this part of the waterfront, were seen as a resource that could help the port solve some of its money problems, that they are low-hanging fruit. And so we talked a lot about some of the controversial developments and also some of the successful ones. So that was a good point to flag. And I think, well, that just brings me right to the dream statement. There was one nice synopsis that came up with the group is, we know we've done the work well when people around the world are looking at the waterfront and said, yeah, San Francisco got it right. So when we hear that, we know we're hitting our targets. And these are all just sort of different inroads on what getting it right might look like. But we think we'll recognize it when we see it. And so I think I'll leave it with that.
Getting it right. Is that the last? Was 8, 9, and 10. Thank you very much. What a great collection of diverse ideas. So it's 8 o'clock now. We are willing to go longer, but we're also willing to let you go. I see a lot of heads going longer now. Staff is going to be here to amend the board, to add things to it. We also are collecting comments in the box here because we do want to hear the things that maybe weren't reported out or maybe didn't make it onto there, so that helps us. And of course, our website is another way, and there will be information coming out to you on all that. and the results of this meeting. So thank you very much for being here. Please stay and ask several of us questions. And again, we really appreciate your time, how important you are. Ms. Oshima.
I don't mean to detain you any further. Thank you again so much for coming. But just as next steps following this, we are going to have some work at trying to get our arms around this. I would reiterate the questionnaires, actually, the specific answers that you may have, we do want to collect those too, notwithstanding the tabletop discussion. So we've got a number of boxes that you can drop your forms in. The next event for the Waterfront Plan, we're planning on a waterfront boat tour on November 1st. It's a Sunday afternoon, and the email notice for signing in and making a reservation will go out, I believe, tomorrow. Ann Cook, one of our team members, is managing that one. So look for that. It's going to be based on vessel capacity, so we'll take as many as we can get. And then the first meeting of the Waterfront Plan Working Group is planned for November 17th. And there will be notices coming out as well. So in short order, we're actually going to start the formal discussions on this. So we really thank you so much for this initial input. Very helpful.
And now a round of applause for everybody that took their evening to come to this meeting. We thank you very much. Thank you.